Chapter 4. Have. For 3 days Virginia lived in the world she had always known. It was interesting enough because she was taking a trip with Mother and Daddy and with Mr. and Mrs. Harmon, who were Mother and Daddy's guests. They went up the coast to Monterey, and they didn't come home until Sunday night. Daddy drove the Cadillac, and Mr. Harmon sat in front with him, while she and Mother and Miss Harmon sat in the rear. If you looked straight ahead, about all you could see was the back of Daddy's neck and the back of Mr. Harmon's neck. Daddy's hair was trimmed evenly about the back, but Mr. Harmon's neck didn't have any hair because his head didn't have any either. His head was round and shiny, and there were 3 rolls of fat, so that it was hard to make out the exact spot where neck ended and head began. But if you studied it carefully, you could just about tell what was head and what was neck. Mr. Harmon smoked cigars all the time, and there was a constant smell of cigar smoke in the car. Daddy didn't seem to mind the smoke, but once in a while it made Mother cough. Both Mother and Daddy were pleased to have Virginia with them, and Mother explained to Miss Harmon that they were not the kind of parents who abandoned their child to her own devices. "I think that is so wise," said Miss Harmon. "Virginia is quite a little lady, and Edward and I feel we can take her anywhere we go," explained Mother. "We've always told her everything and never kept anything from her." And to Virginia she added, "We never keep any secrets from each other, do we, sweet?" "Oh, look, Mother, are they bulls?" asked Virginia quickly. "Steers," said Daddy, from the front seat. "Going to be juicy steaks," said Mr. Harmon. "So our little girl is never treated like a child," continued Mother. They were riding along near Paso Robles at the time, and Virginia, sitting next to Mother, stared out the window at the rolling hills because she didn't like to be talked about in front of people, especially when you were all 3 together in the back seat of a car, and it made the whole thing so what? Well, like being watched when you were doing something that you did in private and shouldn't be watched when you were doing. So she looked out the window in order not to see Miss Harmon, who immediately said, "Oh yes, little Virginia is really a sweet young lady." How sickening grown-ups could be, and wondered just what it meant to be abandoned to your own devices. If it meant playing in the arroyo bottom, she really liked being abandoned. She considered the phrase, but asked no questions about it. The big hotel, called Del Monte, was a lovely place in which to stay, and it was fun to explore the gardens and trails and to ride over the 17-mile drive and play on the beach with Mother and Miss Harmon. On Saturday, Daddy and Mr. Harmon played golf most of the day on what they called the sporting Pebble Beach course. They seemed to mean that it was more difficult than El Encanto course at home, But Daddy went out in a 76 and came back in 75, leaving Ralph 4 down, and was mighty pleased about it, whatever that might mean. Then there was Carmel. That was a funny little place, and she liked that better than Monterey, but Mother said that one just didn't go to Carmel to stay, only to look, and Daddy said the atmosphere is too damned arty for me, when he didn't know Virginia was listening. This made Mr. Harmon laugh, and he said the meaningless words, "If a man doesn't know how to support himself, he can always starve in a garret and call it art, eh, Ed?" And Daddy said, "All this modern art is just so much rubbish, but there's one chap among them who has really got something. He paints intelligently, and he's got Iowa from one end to the other. This chap, Grant Wood." "Oh, yes," said Mr. Harmon. "He's a real American painter." Virginia made a mental note of the conversation. Art, arty, artist. Iowa from one end to the other. American painter. Arty, funny word. Why was this Carmel place arty? It reminded her of Mr. Artichoke. She'd almost forgotten that joke. She must tell it to Ben. "I forgot the joke about Mr. Artichoke." And now Saturday afternoon at sunset, she knew just how it would be getting dark in the arroyo, and how Ben would put Wiki in his cage, and perhaps one or two of those others would pass by on the trail. Such funny names they had, Tex and Gosh, and the big one she had seen only once or twice called Heavy. They would all be coming home about this time, and she could sit here in the big hotel lounge and think about things like that happening more than 300 miles down south. Think about them in that place where you were alone, no matter who was around or where she was, while Mother and Daddy drank cocktails with Mr. and Mrs. Harmon, and she had an orangeade. On the drive north, and again on the drive home, they passed hitchhikers from time to time, and they reminded Virginia of Ben. Some of them looked pretty dirty, but some of them were all right. The Cadillac whizzed past all of them without any recognition. Miss Harmon finally made a comment. "Just look at that poor old man," she said. "Probably everything he owns is tied on his back. And there he goes plodding on in the hot sun." "And after all," sighed Mother, "I suppose he's human." So they were talking about old men who walked on the highway, were they? Well, she knew an old man who used to do that, but now he had a nice home in the Arroyo Bottom. Probably the old man they had passed didn't have a pet rat, and probably his name wasn't Ben, either, but he must have some name. "I wonder if he's got a moniker," said Virginia. "A what?" asked Mother. "A moniker." "Why, I never heard you use that word before," said Mother. "Where did you hear it?" "Oh, I don't know," said Virginia. Then Mother laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind Mother used when she was obliged to laugh at something she didn't think was funny. "You know," she said to Miss Harmon, who had smiled politely, "Edward and I send her to public school. We try to be liberal, and sometimes private schools turn out such little snobs. But I don't know if we can keep it up. Some of the language she picks up. It's the times, said Miss Harmon. I was reading a novel the other day. I can't think of the title of it now, but it was very well reviewed, and it simply wasn't fit to be in print. Of course, it was about the masses, but even so, if we allow vile stuff to be printed, we must expect our children to pick it up. I really think, Margaret, if Ralph and I had a child, we'd send her to a private school. 2 more hitchhikers were standing on the shoulder of the highway as the car sped toward them, and they saw that it was full. They gave up jerking their thumbs and stared at it as it passed by. Nothing was said about them, but a few miles farther on they passed a man and a woman. The man half-heartedly solicited a ride, and then gave up, but the woman sat on a suitcase beside the road and didn't even look up. Mr. Harmon looked back at her. You hear of some pitiful cases these days, he said. You do indeed, Daddy said. Remember Gaugus? Asked Mr. Harmon. Oh, yes, said Daddy. Well, this is confidential, but my attorney told me a story about him that shocked me. Do you know that all that man has left is $30,000 in government bonds, and a ranch in California, and a ranch in Arizona? Tish, tish, said Daddy. I said, get him to a hospital, continued Mr. Harmon. That's the only thing to do. Get him to a hospital. And what have we to face in the future? Asked Daddy. Where's the way out? National debt climbing, unemployment climbing, the greatest cancer in the heart of this country today, said Mr. Harmon, can be described in one word: relief. I agree, said Daddy. It breaks down the morale of the nation, said Mr. Harmon. All this WPA and PWA and CCC, call that American? Why, I know of ranch hands who deliberately quit picking cotton in order to go on relief, and the ranch was paying them 20 cents an hour, too. They wanted 27 and a half, or they wouldn't work. Now I can pay my pickers 27 and a half and operate at a little profit, or I can afford to take a little loss. But I can't let down the associated growers who'd be sure to operate at a loss, and then there wouldn't be any work for anybody. No, I'd plow my cotton under before I'd let the mass tell me how to run my ranch. But if there weren't all this relief, they'd have to work for 20 cents an hour. The trouble is, said Daddy, they don't want to work. There, you've got it, said Mr. Harmon. All these men we see on the highway, they wouldn't work if you offered them jobs. All they want to do is to get to a government camp and stay there. First a few, then hundreds, then thousands, and every one has a vote, don't forget. Close to 10 million of the proletariat now trades its votes for bread, and our income tax pays for them. The back of Mr. Harmon's neck was getting red, and one of the 3 rolls of fat twitched. I shudder to think how the administration has made use of the mass, said Daddy. Said Mr. Harmon, blowing a cloud of cigar smoke. Where's the end of it? Said Daddy. That's what worries me. Well, The American standard of living is too high, said Mr. Harmon. A worker expects to have an automobile and a radio and send his kids to college. It's ridiculous. We've educated our mass to live beyond its means. Look at the dictator countries. You don't hear of any strikes and labor troubles there. Why? Because the standard of living is lower. The mass don't expect anything more. But in this country, a man doesn't want to pick cotton unless he tells you how much. You have to pay him. 2 of the rolls of fat were twitching now. If Mr. Harmon would just go on talking, all 3 of them would twitch at once. It was interesting to watch. Then Mother said, "But what's in the future, Ralph? Where is America drifting?" "Why, Margaret," said Mr. Harmon, turning in his seat so that it was hard to see the 3 rolls of fat at the back of his neck. "But maybe he'll turn back again in a minute. Just watch." "Margaret, we who are still politically sane." Then he coughed his long, racking cough, choked over his cigar, and said, "Humph." "Yes," said Daddy. "People who are in the position that we're in," said Mr. Harmon, "must face this issue squarely. Now, right now, I admit I've been barking up the wrong tree. That is, vilifying the obvious mistakes of the New Deal won't help us now. It's too late. The damage has been done. The worker has tasted relief. He's never going to let go of it." "Horrible thought," said Daddy. "Men like your husband and me," said Mr. Harmon, screwing further around in the front seat, so that you couldn't see the back of his neck any more at all, but his face was still flushed, so the back of his neck must still be red, "are going to have to fight this administration with its own medicine. If Roosevelt gives 'em bread for their votes, we've got to go him one better and find some way to give 'em cake." Mr. Harmon didn't say what kind. Chocolate maybe, or all kinds maybe. "Expensive though," said Daddy. "Edward, my boy," said Mr. Harmon, "many a man believes he's eating cake just because he's told that it is cake." You could see a corner of one roll of fat now, and it was twitching. "Ah," said Daddy, "I would certainly call myself a liberal," declared Mr. Harmon, "but—" "Liberal, it's a nice word. I'm a liberal. I believe in moderation in all things. Now, if our ultimate end is to preserve the God-given liberties of our Constitution for the good of the common man, and I even include the hitchhiker on the highway—" "Yes," said Daddy, "if the Republican ideology is to be preserved for the good of mankind." What a big word, ideology. It was getting hard to understand now. Then I say, at the risk of being called Machiavellian, good night. What in the world was that? The end justifies the means, and if we've got to tell 'em it's cake and make 'em think it's cake, then by God it is our duty to practice a subterfuge. Subterfuge for the ultimate good of the worker, the proletariat, the man on the street, for the ultimate status quo of capital and labor, for the preservation of states' rights, liberty, justice, and the tried and true American way. All 3 rolls twitched. Hooray! Mother interrupted by saying, "Oh, Ralph, that's splendid. It's clear seeing," agreed Daddy. Ralph practically said the very same things in his speech at the Ambassador last week, said Miss Harmon, and they all applauded. "Oh, I softened it there a bit," said Mr. Harmon, "but we can speak frankly here, and I know personally, and it's known in Washington, that we face an issue in which it is sink or swim. I may not be an Olympic swimmer, but I certainly prefer to keep my head above the dangerous riptides of socialism, communism, Bolshevism, and all the backwash that goes with such un-American practices. It was a serious moment. All four of the grown-ups got into the conversation, and it became hard to follow all of it. Front seat, back seat, and then you listened to something in the front seat and got confused about what they were saying in the back seat, and you came out of it all with the general feeling that Mr. Harmon was saying awfully important things, but they were so important you couldn't understand all the words, and finally you let the talk go on without making any effort to listen to it, and you went into that place where you were you, and nobody could tell what you were thinking, and you sat still and wondered what Ben and Wicky were up to, now that it was Sunday afternoon. It was after 11 o'clock at night before they reached Pasadena, and Virginia was tired and almost went to sleep in the car, but before they could go home, they had to take Mr. and Mrs. Harmon home first, and they lived in a nearby community of San Marino, in a house twice as big as Daddy's, with twice as much ground around it. But there was no arroyo near the Harmon's house, and Virginia wouldn't have traded it for her own. Then there was the usual delay, while the Harmon's bags were taken out of the trunk of the car, and everybody told everybody what a wonderful time it had been, and Mr. Harmon wanted Mother and Daddy to come in for a nightcap, which was ridiculous, and was probably a joke of some kind, and Mother and Daddy said they had to go right home because Virginia was tired. She protested through a yawn that she wasn't a bit tired, and Miss Harmon kissed her, a nasty wet experience, and Mr. Harmon patted her head and said she was a great little traveler, and she could go anywhere with him any time. And finally it all came to an end, and she and Mother and Daddy were driving out of the Harmon place and across Pasadena to their own home. They came to Colorado Street and drove through the business section, and Mother and Daddy hadn't said a word. Virginia had the back seat to herself now, as Mother was riding in front with Daddy. "Well," said Mother, and there was that curious tone in it that you sometimes heard in Mother's voice when she and Daddy talked, just as if Virginia were not present. "He's tight as a clam," said Daddy. "Who? Mr. Harmon?" "What did you expect?" asked Mother. "Lots of platitudes," said Daddy. "A few aphorisms." "Lots of what? A few what? But he's not talking if he can help it." Well, that was true. Mr. Harmon was a kind of quiet man. He had hardly talked to her on the whole trip. About the only thing that she could remember now that he had said to her was, "Do you know why little pigs eat so much?" And when she had said no, Mr. Harmon said, "Because they want to make hogs of themselves." Then he had made a kind of funny face, by pursing his lips and squinting his eyes, and he patted her on the head. Now a man who couldn't think of anything more than that to say over a whole week-end wasn't talking if he could help it. Daddy was right. "That bit about cake," said Mother. "There, you've got it." "Yes, and then again no," said Daddy. "I had the feeling he was sounding me instead of vice versa." "What for?" asked Mother. Why should he take the trouble? Your guess is as good as mine. She asked me if we would be their guest at Ensenada. What did you say? I said we'd be delighted. Of course. When? She didn't say, but I gathered that the conversation trailed away, and suddenly Virginia woke up. She had been asleep on the back seat, and Daddy was smiling at her and lifting her out of the car. My poor little chickadee, Mother said. Such a long trip. I'm not sleepy, said Virginia, as Mother took her by the hand and led her into the house. You go right upstairs and take your clothes off, and Mother will be right up. Virginia went up the stairs, one at a time, for a change, and once in her room began automatically to undress. In a few minutes, Mother came up and tucked her into bed, and she was asleep before Mother could turn off the light. On Monday, it was school again, but on Monday afternoon, it was the arroyo. She skipped home along Palm Drive and entered the house by her accustomed route, the back door. There was something to be done today that was especially exciting. Hello, Celia, she chirped as she hurried through the kitchen. She leaped up the stairs, tossed 2 schoolbooks into her room, and went at once to Daddy's bathroom. It was necessary to stand on a chair in order to reach the top shelf of the medicine closet, and there was a black box containing a beautiful razor and all the funny things gentlemen used in shaving. There was time for only one admiring glance at the contents. She snapped the box shut, climbed down from the chair, gave a quick look around to be sure that nothing had been unduly disturbed, and hurried downstairs. It would never do to have Celia see the black box, and it was too big to stuff inside your dress, so she avoided any difficulty by leaving the house by the front door. Then it was an easy matter to scoot by the kitchen in a hurry, through the garden, over the hedge, and down the trail. At the bottom, she almost bumped into Heavy, who was coming out of the chaparral. She hesitated, and then said, "Hello." "What you got there?" asked Heavy. "This. Oh, something for Ben." She half concealed the box behind her. Heavy shook his head skeptically. "You'll get us all hung out," he said. "I seen it happen before." "What?" asked Virginia, utterly perplexed. "You're dynamite," said Heavy. "I ain't foolin' with it, and I ain't gonna be around when it blows up. Little girls runnin' around loose. Woo!" He snorted in disgust and marched on. Virginia watched him go. What a funny one. When he talked, it didn't make any sense. Oh well, he didn't matter. He wasn't anything like Ben. She skipped through the chaparral, and there was Ben, sitting in the sunlight, the broken chair tipped back against his shack, and there was Wiki in his cage beside Ben. "Well, well," smiled Ben, "here comes Virginia." He was genuinely pleased to see her, and that was nice because she was happy to see him too. She thought how much nicer he was than Mr. Harmon. He had kept his promise and not shaved, and now he needed a shave terribly. "Ben, guess what I brought you this time?" She kept the box behind her back. Meditated Ben. He sniffed the air and stared up at the sky. "Roast duck," he said finally. No, no, it's something you need terribly. Let's see, he racked his brain. Can't think of nothing I need very much. Try hard, Ben. Well, I ain't got a stovepipe hat. No, it's not a stovepipe hat. What is a stovepipe hat? One of them opry hats. One more guess is all you can have. Is it animal or vegetable? Asked Ben. Neither one. It's hard and yellow. Oh, sure, said Ben. Now I got it. It's a sack of gold. No, look, Ben. Virginia brought the black box from behind her back and raised the lid. She put it on Ben's knees, and he examined the contents in detail. Well, 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 goodness me, he said with acted appreciation. Ain't that just too pretty for words? My. That's soap, explained Virginia. That's a thing in case you cut yourself. That's the handle, and it screws on there, and the blade goes in there. Maybe it's gold, I don't know. Anyway, it looks like gold. That's toilet water in the little bottle, and it makes you smell nice. Well now, see here, said Ben doubtfully. Ain't your daddy going to wonder where? These are the blades, explained Virginia. Now I'll show you how they work. You put one over these little sticky-up things, see? And then you screw the handle on tight, and you're ready to shave. How do you like it, Ben? Why, I think it's just fine and dandy, said Ben. Just fine and dandy. But what I'm wondering is, what's your daddy going to think when he starts looking for... Oh, he'll never miss it, declared Virginia. He hasn't used it for weeks, not for months. Wasn't it nice of me to bring it? Aren't you surprised? Well, surprised ain't half the word, said Ben. Oh, goody goody, I'm glad. A nice fancy razor set is a thing I've always been wantin' all my life, and now you've got one. Yes, indeedy. When are you going to use it? Oh, well, there ain't no hurry, so I... Yes, there is. Use it now, Ben. I want to see you shave with it. I know. Let's have a barber shop, shall we? Takes warm water to shave, said Ben, and let's heat some. And I ain't got a fire going now. Maybe we could shave Wiki. Oh, no, indeedy. Wiki wouldn't like that at all. No, I suppose he wouldn't. He's got to have them whiskers of his. If he shaved 'em off, he'd be unhappy. Then what'll we do, Ben? I tell you what, let's just look at this pretty razor set tomorrow, and tomorrow I'll use it. No use dirtying it up straight off. Let's wait'll you come next time. Won't that be nice? Well, all right, agreed Virginia. I can put some toilet water on you, though. Well, objected Ben. Virginia unscrewed the bottle. This isn't right, she explained. You're supposed to do it after you shave, but once won't hurt. Raise your chin up, like this. Higher. There. Now hold still. Ben winced as the liquid ran down his neck and around his shirt collar. That's enough, he insisted. It's got to be rubbed in, said Virginia. Rub it in hard. Doesn't it smell nice? Well, said Ben. He rubbed his chin gingerly. Virginia handed him the bottle and stepped back and surveyed him with a critical eye. I can smell it this far away. She vouchsafes its gentleman smell. Heavy came along the trail. He marched up to Ben's shack and looked at Ben with the shaving set on his knees and the bottle of toilet water in his hand. He sniffed. "Oh my God," he said. "Stink sweet." He gave Virginia a look and sighed, "Phew," and marched on to his own shack. "He's an awfully funny fellow, isn't he?" said Virginia. "Well, yes and no," said Ben. "He's not really a gentleman," said Virginia. "The way you are. They wouldn't let him in the hotel at Monterey, not the way he acts." "So you been to Monterey?" said Ben, incredulously. "Yes. Have you ever been there, Ben?" "No, but I know where you mean," said Ben. "Why, it would take me a week or two to get all the way up there. You sure do get around. Daddy didn't drive fast either. He didn't want to get a ticket, because Mr. Harmon was with him." "Uh-huh," said Ben, returning the toilet water to the shaving set. "Mother and Daddy are on their best behavior when Mr. and Mrs. Harmon are around." That was funny. She hadn't thought of that before, yet it was true. Mother and Daddy had acted just as you act when you're on your best behavior. "Why did they do that, Ben? Do you know?" "No," said Ben. "I wouldn't know. But that's just what they did. We're all going to Ensenada, too." "Maybe this here Mr. Harmon is your daddy's boss," said Ben. "Oh no, Daddy says he'll never take orders from anybody." "Is Mr. Harmon rich?" "Yes, he's quite rich." "Is he old?" "Yes, he's old and fat and bald-headed." Mother and Daddy are wondering now if the Harmons were worth the expense. And Mother said, "At least we never have to get into that awful married thing that the Harmons are in." What did she mean by that, Ben? Ben considered before he spoke. Well, she must have meant something, he admitted. "It must be funny to be married." "Most everybody does it, though," said Ben. "Why do people do it?" "It's a social custom of sorts," explained Ben. "But you're not married." "No, but once I was." "You were?" Virginia was amazed. "You were married to a wife?" "Uh-huh." "Why, Ben, I never knew you were married. Where's Miss Ben?" "They came and took her away." "Who did?" "The authorities." "You mean they arrested her?" "Well, not exactly," said Ben. "When was this?" "Oh, years ago. Years and years ago. I can still see it, all just as plain though." "Where was it?" "Well, it was in Pennsylvania, in the summertime, and I was livin' on the outskirts of a town, and there was a great big house, like a hospital or something over on the hill. One evenin', when I come home to my little house, something like this here shack, it was, only bigger. Once it had been an old chicken house, but I fixed it up nice. So one evenin', when I come home, who should I see but a right attractive-lookin' woman busying herself around my house, just like it was hers. I says, 'Hello,' and she says, 'I'm Mary Sunshine,' and I says, 'Think of that,' and she says, 'I'm cookin' supper.' And she was, too, but she was havin' a little trouble gettin' the fire to burn nice, and I poked my head in the house and come out again. And when I come out, I'll be switched if she hadn't yanked off her dress, a kind of gray uniform-like thing it was, and she throwed that dress in the fire, and right away the fire began to burn nice, but she didn't have a stitch of clothes on her." "Why, Ben," Virginia went into squeals of laughter, "I tried to give her some old clothes, but she wouldn't have 'em, so pretty soon we ate supper. Well, there weren't nothing to do but asked her to stay in my house, so that's how I met Mary Sunshine, and she come to be my wife. Did you buy her a new dress? Well, no, not exactly. She never asked for one. She never asked for nothing. She never even asked any questions at all, but just busied herself about the house and run it in apple pie order, and swept it, and cooked 3 meals a day. And if I was gone for an hour or all day, it never made no difference to her at all. She just went about her business, and looked after things, and without any clothes on, asked Virginia. Well, yes, most of the time she didn't like to wear anything. It was one of her peculiarities, sort of. Anyway, it was summertime, but she was a splendid woman in most every way a man could want, and she lived there with me 6 days, and we got along just fine and dandy. She had a wonderful disposition, just wonderful, and she had fine ideas too, like being a angel and all. An angel? Yeah, she figured she was in the process of becoming an angel, and her wings was growing. That was the only question she ever asked me, whether her wings had growed any appreciable amount or not. She asked me that all the time. And did they? Well, I'd examine her back, and I couldn't see no wings, but she said they were there, and she was so set on it that I guess maybe they was. So maybe by this time Mary Sunshine's flying around some place, and if so, I hope she flies out here. She'd take to this. Oh, she'd like this place. Why, them 6 days she lived with me was the finest 6 days of my life. What happened on the 7th day, Ben? Then, on the 7th day, a couple of deputy sheriffs with shotguns come around and took her away. Why? What for? Well, it seems she had got out of the hospital-like building over on the hill, and they wanted to take her back there. It was a kind of county bug house, and they kept Mary Sunshine there because they didn't know what else to do with her. While she was living with me, they had been looking high and wide for her, and there she was all the time, right under their nose. She put up a big fuss, but they totted her off just the same, and put her in solitary, and I never seen her again. Oh, that was too bad. I feel sorry for Mary Sunshine. I bet you missed her. I missed her for quite a spell, and in the town dump I found a busted alarm clock called Sunbeam. I fixed it up, and it run, and it made me think of her. By rights it should have been called Sunshine, but Sunbeam was near enough. When it got cold, I went south, and the day I left, I looked across at the bug house on the hill, and I couldn't help wondering what Mary Sunshine was doing in there. Maybe she could look out and see you. I don't know. When I get to thinking about it now, I see that all that was wrong with Mary Sunshine was that she was ahead of her time. Nowadays, there's nudist camps, and people don't think nothing of it. She wasn't crazy at all. She was a kind of pioneer. Why, she wasn't no more fit to be put in a bug house than you or I are. It was a shame, that's what it was, but it just goes to show. What's it show, Ben? Why, it goes to show up human nature. The public never knows its great leaders until it's too late. They laughed at Columbus, didn't they? Aha! Some people thought he was crazy. Well, there you are. They laughed at Fulton's steamboat. They said Edison didn't have sense enough to come in out of the rain. They said Lindbergh couldn't fly to Paris, and they went and locked up a foremost advanced woman like Mary Sunshine. It just goes to show. Maybe they let her out by this time, Ben. Don't know, but I do know that I never found another woman like Mary Sunshine, or one half as good, so I never got married again. And that was over 30 years ago, too. She was certainly a splendid woman. I think that was right not to get married again. I wouldn't either. A real considerate woman like Mary Sunshine just sets a man off. A marriage like that is a fine thing for any man. What's fine about it? Oh, gettin' up in the mornin' and figurin' there was somebody goin' through the day with you who wouldn't ask no questions, and who would be waitin' for you to come home, and who was your helper. Your what? Helpmeet. Oh, two is stronger than one. When a man gets married, he can do a lot of things he wouldn't have thought he could have done if he wasn't. When they come and took her away, it changed my whole life. Do wives feel that way too? I reckon so. It's something like two people becomin' one and workin' together, like one person. You ain't got no secrets from each other. Oh, but I love secrets. You're my secret. Nobody knows about you. If I had a husband, I wouldn't let him know about you. I'd keep you in that place where I'm alone. Do you think I'll ever get married, Ben? Oh, yes indeedy. I'm not sure I'd like it. What will my husband be like? Oh, you'll fall in love with some smart young feller along about 10 or 12 years from now, and you'll think he's the most wonderful thing on earth. I will. Uh-huh. And he'll be so in love with you that he won't know if he's comin' or goin'. He's a little boy out flyin' a kite somewhere now, but when you meet him, you'll know him. How will I know him? You just will. That's how things are. Virginia thought it over. It was true. She had seen boys flying kites from time to time, but she had never looked at them critically. The next time she saw a boy flying a kite, she'd pay close attention. Ben, if I got married, would I have to give up the place where I'm alone? Now let's see, mused Ben. I ain't quite sure how you mean. Well, it's like this. She sat down cross-legged, in the sand, in front of Ben. I have one place where I'm alone. Nobody knows it. Not a single solitary person. I've never even told Mother or Daddy. But there's a place. Do you know what I mean? Maybe so. I can always go there any time at all. When we were away and they were all talking, I could go into that place where I'm alone and think of you here in the arroyo, and nobody knew what I was doing or thinking or anything. Do you have a place like that? Oh yes, yes indeedy. Does everybody? I reckon. What is it like to you, Ben? Well, let's see. Ben tipped back and forth on the broken chair. I can think what I want, and decide what I want, and pick up and light out any time I choose, and can't nobody tell nothin' about me. That's it, Ben. I'm the same way. Tell me some more. And in that place where I'm alone, there ain't nobody else. Yes, yes, it's the one place that is all mine because all me is it. Oh, Ben, that's just like me. Aha. Do animals have a place like that? Does Wiki? No, Ben considered. I kinda doubt it. I reckon it is something that comes with being human. I reckon it is something that all children are onto. But you're not a child. Now that's right. It must be something I remembered for 60 years. I'm glad I can have it all my life too. In a way, said Ben, that's all there is. That place. In a way. Why? Well, all that outside of you. Them there bushes, and that sand you're settin' on, and the sky, and even me, all that ain't really real. Oh, yes it is. You're real, Ben. Only because you think so, said Ben. Only what you think is real, and what you think is in that place where you're alone. So there ain't nothin' real except that place where you're alone. That's all there is. But Ben, once you said everything out there was God, bushes and trees, and even black widow spiders. 'Tis. Now you say bushes and trees and black widow spiders aren't real. They ain't. But Ben, that doesn't make any sense. That's because you think something to be real has got to be solid, but there ain't nothing more real than an idea, and an idea ain't solid at all. How about a big hunk of iron, so heavy you can't lift it? That's real, isn't it? Nope. Or an automobile, or a great big steam engine, or the whole Santa Fe streamliner. That's real, isn't it? Nope. Why, Ben, how can you be so silly? You can touch those things and see that they're real. Look-a-here, said Ben. Maybe this'll help you catch on. You know that there ain't no sound if there ain't a ear to listen to it with, don't you? No. Well, sound ain't nothin' you can touch, is it? No. And a deaf man don't know it if you shoot off a firecracker in back of him, does he? No. But you know it. Yes. Well, how do you know it? Because I have ears to hear with. That's right. So if there wasn't no ears on anybody in the world, there wouldn't be no sound anywhere in the world. And if there wasn't no eyes in the world, there wouldn't be no colors in the world. And in just the same way it takes a mouth to taste with, and a hand to feel with, and a nose to smell with. Everything that we think is real is the result of them 5 senses. It's because of his 5 senses that Wiki thinks he's livin' in a real world. And if just one of them senses don't work like he's used to it workin', why he ups and has a nervous breakdown. Humans is just the same. If humans could just catch on that everything they think is so important ain't even real except in their minds, they'd save a lot of worryin'. Look at me. I never have no nervous breakdowns. I won't take it into my head to jump off that there Colorado Street Bridge, the way a lot of folks has done. 'Cause why? 'Cause I know that there ain't nothin' worth worryin' about, because there ain't nothin' anyway. Then what's the use of doing anything, Ben? What do I go to school for? Oh, I don't mean, said Ben, that everybody should just set around until they dry up and blow away. It's right to do things and keep doing 'em, but at the same time, A man has got to understand that nothing's really worth worrying about. If it don't work out one way, it'll work out another. If he gets to worrying about it, he's taking it too serious. If he gets to worrying about maybe a big hunk of iron will be too heavy for him to lift, or that his wife has got put in the bug house, or that maybe he's gonna be late and miss the streamliner, that shows he thinks them things is more real than he is, and he shouldn't think that because them things is only the result of his five senses, like I showed, and don't even exist 'cept in his mind. So, when you come right down to it, there ain't nothing but mind. Now that place where you're alone is right smack in the middle of your mind, and it's you and everything else in the world at once, because everything else is mind too. Maybe that's kinda hard for Virginia to catch on to all at once, is it? Well, it doesn't make very much sense, Virginia admitted. Then when you get it clear that there ain't nothing nowhere but mind, continued Ben, you can easy see that all the mind there is everywhere is the mind of God, and you. Oh, Ben, you've got the most wonderful eye. I got two eyes, but I'm only seeing one. It's deep green color, and all around the edge your eyelashes are like thick dark grass, and right in the middle, in that black shining part, I can see me. Ben's eye is God and I. Ben's eye, God and I. Say it fast. Well, whatever my eye is, you, in that place where you're alone, are just one little tiny part of God. Understand that. Ben's eyes, God and I. Maybe Mr. Harmon could figure it out, said Virginia seriously. He's tight as a clam, but when he talks, he uses some of the biggest words. No, I reckon Mr. Harmon ain't as close to it as you are. You just keep on using that place where you're alone, like you do, and don't tell nobody about it, and you'll learn a lot more'n me, 'cause you got a long way to go yet. I reckon maybe your parents is raising you all right after all. Anyways, if you don't get up the trail, they'll be figuring somebody kidnapped their little girl. We haven't fed Wiki yet. You fetch him out of his cage, and I'll get some bread. Virginia opened the wire door and coaxed the rat to come to her hand. Ben went into his shack and came out with a crust of bread. Is that all he gets tonight? Asked Virginia. Rations getting low, said Ben. I'll fix that, said Virginia. Celia thinks she's going to have eggplant tomorrow, but she's not. No, I don't like eggplant, so I'm going to bring the whole thing down here. Here, Wiki, supper for Wiki. I think he understands me. Look how he acts. Oh, sure he does. By rights, he's half yours. Can I call him my rat to myself, I mean? Yes, indeedy. I won't tell anybody, but I'd like to think of him as my rat part of the time. He's half yours and half mine, agreed Ben. I wrote a theme about him for English composition, explained Virginia, and I called it The Pet Rat, even though he wasn't really my rat then. I wrote all about him, and I put you in it, and the teacher said it was quite original, and I got an A. That's good, said Ben. I used to get A's right along when I went to school. Did you, Ben? Yes, indeedy. Once I knowed so much more in the teacher that was teachin' me, I skipped a whole grade. Gee, you were smart. Then I begun skipping grade after grade, and day after day, until I had went through the whole education there was, and come around again right to where I started from. So I never had to go to school no more after that. Oh, Ben, you're fooling me. Ain't never wore no dunce cap, said Ben, with propriety. Here, give me the rest of the bread, said Virginia. He's chewin' my fingers. Here, Wicky, more victuals, more victuals. They watched the rat finish the crust. Virginia looked up at the sky. My goodness, she said. I guess it is late. See you tomorrow. Good night, said Ben. If you don't hurry, you won't get any supper yourself. It was later than she thought. Ben was right about that. She hurried up the trail and over the hedge and into the garden. It was almost dark, and as soon as she got in the house, Mother wanted to know where she had been. It was an awkward moment, for Mother had telephoned Miss Ensley to see if Virginia were playing with Claire. And Miss Ensley said that Virginia hadn't been there for days. She managed to squirm out of it by saying that she had just been around. But Celia looked all over for you. It's 6:30. A casual honesty, discounting the importance of the whole thing, was Virginia's instinctive defense. Oh, she said brightly, I went down to the arroyo bottom. I guess that's how she missed me. You climbed all the way down to the bottom. Well, there's a trail. It's not dangerous at all, Mother. The trail goes right down. It's just as easy as anything. It's almost as easy as walking on the sidewalk. But you mustn't do that, darling. You have the whole garden. You have the playhouse. You may even play in the lot. But Mother doesn't want you to play on the arroyo edge. And you mustn't try to climb down to the bottom. You might fall and hurt yourself. Now promise Mother you won't do that any more. All right. And I have a surprise for you too. What is it? Wednesday is Claire's birthday. After school, she's having a little party. You're invited. A birthday party? Yes. We'll have to get a little present for you to take. You see if you can think of something nice to give Claire. What'll it be, Mother? Now you think what you'd like to have if it were your party. A pet rat. Why, Virginia, most people don't understand rats, Mother. They have nervous breakdowns just like people. Most people aren't interested in rats. Now see if you can think of something nice. A wristwatch. No, that would be too much. A present must be in good taste. It mustn't be too little, and it mustn't be too much. Claire's parents could give her a wristwatch, but you wouldn't give her anything like that. Well, I don't know what she wants. How would a nice pocketbook be? Something like the one you got on your birthday. Oh, that'd be awfully nice, Mother. Then do you want to go shopping with Mother tomorrow afternoon? Yes, only what? I was thinking what I had to do tomorrow after school. What do you have to do? To go see Wicky and Ben was, of course, the natural thing to do, but Mother couldn't be expected to understand that. Oh, nothing, I guess. Let's get a red pocketbook. The kind that has a little purse inside. "We'll see what we can find," said Mother. "Or a green one," said Virginia lightly. "It doesn't make any material difference." "Doesn't it?" "No, we only think we see colors. Nothing's really real if you really understand about it the way I do." Mother gave her a puzzled look. The advent of Claire Inslee's 11th birthday changed the order of the next 2 days. On Tuesday, Mother called for her in the Pontiac at school, and they went shopping together and selected a red pocketbook with a silk lining containing a small red change purse and a mirror. They had it wrapped as a gift. There was no chance to go to the Arroyo Bottom to see Ben and Wiki because she was downtown with Mother until 5:30. And Wednesday was so exciting that it almost eliminated all thought of Ben and Wiki. She hurried home from school, and this time it was Mother who helped her dress. The braids were combed out, and her hair allowed to flow down her back below her shoulders. She washed until her skin shone, and then she put on a white organdy dress with a blue sash. In her hair, Mother tied a ribbon which matched the sash. But the matter of perfume was really a problem. Virginia wanted to use Mycen, but Mother explained that Mycen simply didn't go with blue and white. And strangely enough, neither did Cassandra or Christmas Night or Numero 5. "But Mother, you never go to a party without something. What shall I do?" "Oh, we'll take care of that," said Mother cheerfully. "Shoes next." By 5:15, she was ready. Everything was complete, except the perfume, and Mother settled that by flicking a few drops of cologne on her. It really wasn't a satisfactory substitute at all, but Mother insisted that she smelled beautifully, and explained that the person who wore cologne or perfume never could smell it herself, so possibly it was all right. Virginia surveyed herself in Mother's full-length mirror. "You look very sweet," Mother said. That was nice, of course, but she really didn't want to look sweet. She wanted to look smart. If she could have her hair waved and wear just a tiny, tiny drop of Mycen. But Mother always came back with the same argument she had always used. "Wait until you're in your teens, then you'll be a young lady." It was exasperating. What was the strange thing about being in your teens that made it so important? Maybe I'll never be in my teens. Maybe I'll die before I'm in my teens. But that's not so. I won't die. I may never die at all. Virginia, you mustn't have morbid thoughts like that. Can I rouge my lips when I'm 13? Patiently, Mother went over it all once again, even though Virginia knew all the words, and Mother knew that she knew them. "Sometime when you're in your teens, perhaps when you're 14, we'll cut your hair and have it waved, and you can carry a compact and be a grown lady, but you won't be a little girl any more. I'll lose my baby then." This last was the worst. Mother always sounded sad when she said that. "I'll lose my baby then." Virginia hated it. She instinctively revolted against the implied possession. She didn't want to go on being Mother's baby forever. Why did Mother think she would? "I'll be glad," said Virginia. "You don't want Mother to be middle-aged, do you?" This question was always an enigma. What did Mother think she already was? Grown-ups were grown-ups, and all grown-ups were middle-aged. Mother had some of the strangest ideas. "Find your present now. It's time to go," Mother said. The Inslee house was only 3 blocks away, so Virginia walked to the party carrying the present, wrapped as a gift. Guests were already arriving in cars. Altogether, there were 12 girls, counting the hostess, some of whom Virginia did not know. 2 of them came from Los Angeles, and there was one guest from Hollywood, and it was bruited about that she had actually been in the movies, once with Shirley Temple. This distinguished individual was dressed in a smart 2-piece suit of tan suede cloth, with fur collar and cuffs and gloves to match. Her blonde hair was cut short and waved, and she casually explained that she could remember her own 11th birthday. But now that she was 13, it seemed very remote. Her name was Catherine Corle, and you discovered at once that she hadn't known until the last minute whether the studio would need her this afternoon or not. She was an object of great interest, and it was understood that later she might sing. Virginia watched her whenever possible, and as Miss Corle did not mind being the center of attraction, Virginia was able to stare without unseeming rudeness. To think that she had played with Shirley Temple, and had reached that important age, the teens. "Yes, Shirley is quite a delightful girl," said Miss Corle when pressed. "I'm fond of Deanna, too." Girls began to collect around her, and questions were asked. "Jane? Well, I've never played with Jane, so I really can't say. Mickey, yes, a real trooper." "Trooper? Now what do you suppose that meant?" Questions began to pile upon one another. "Do you know Jeanette MacDonald? What's Gary Cooper like? Is Clark Gable nice? How about Ronald Colman? Bette Davis? Robert Taylor?" Until those in charge of the party, Claire's mother, Miss Inslee, and Claire's auntie, Miss Bishop, had difficulty in organizing the first game, which consisted of a treasure hunt. Miss Corle asked to be excused from the treasure hunt, and to the last of her admirers to go, she admitted that she really preferred bridge to childish games. Virginia got near enough to detect a faint odor of perfume emanating from Miss Corle's person. Well, at least it wasn't my sin, and some day she would be wearing my sin. She raced away to the treasure hunt, which took her all over the house, and finally rewarded her with a basket of chocolate doubloons. All of the girls found various treasures. Virginia was one of the first to offer the distinguished guest a chocolate doubloon, which was prettily refused. It came as a great surprise to Virginia that there should be anyone who voluntarily did not eat candy. "Well, does it make you sick?" asked Virginia. "Goodness, no," said Miss Corle, with perhaps too much emphasis. "Well, why don't you eat it then?" asked Virginia, still perplexed. "Well, really, I have a pet rat," said Virginia, stuffing a doubloon in her mouth, "and he just loves candy. I think I'll go over to the piano and look at the gifts," said Miss Corle. "I'll go with you," said Virginia. "I gave Claire a pocket book. What did you get her?" "Oh, Claire dear, said Miss Corle, may I look at your lovely gifts? You bet, said Claire. That red pocketbook. I gave her that, explained Virginia. I never wear red, said Miss Corle. Do you use perfume when you're in the movies? Asked Virginia. Miss Corle looked at Virginia with a studied criticism. You are just a child, aren't you? She said. It was a statement, not a question. Virginia sensed the rebuff. It baffled her. Was Miss Corle trying to be nasty to her? Was that it? If so, why? It was strange. And why didn't she answer the question about using perfume when acting? There was no time to settle the issue, as a game of musical chairs was in order. Claire's auntie, Miss Bishop, was already at the piano. Again Miss Corle asked to be excused from playing. Maybe she's got a stomach ache, said Virginia to Claire, but she said it so that half the room could hear. Don't know, said Claire. You sick, Kathy? No. Go right on with your game, Claire dear. The hostess, with the exception of Miss Ensley and Miss Bishop, was the only one present who could call the impressive Miss Corle Kathy. Her mother and my mother are cousins, explained Claire. I went to her 12th birthday party, so she's come to my 11th. 12th, said Virginia. I thought she was 13. No, 12, said Claire. Oh, said Virginia. She had the funniest birthday party. There were hardly any children there at all, said Claire. Who was there? Asked Virginia. Grown-ups. Huh, said Virginia. Movies or no movies? A friend of Shirley Temple or not a friend of Shirley Temple? Miss Corle lost stature with Virginia at once. 13, after all, was a young lady, but 12, well, that meant she wasn't even 2 years older than Virginia. Phooey, said Virginia to Claire. What? Nothing, said Virginia, just phooey. They went round and round during the musical chairs. Several girls were eliminated. Then Virginia was eliminated, and gradually the contestants wore down to 2. Those who were no longer in the game watched and encouraged the finalist from the sidelines. Virginia found a place beside Miss Corle. Don't you like musical chairs? Asked Virginia. I don't play games, said Miss Corle. It doesn't make any material difference, said Virginia. Your name's Material Difference. That's my teacher's name, too. Do you have a teacher? I have a tutor, said Miss Corle. I never saw you in the movies, said Virginia pleasantly. Not even once. I'm never in B pictures, replied Miss Corle. What are they? Asked Virginia. Miss Corle didn't seem to hear. Ever get hit with a pie? Asked Virginia. I like pictures where they throw pies. Miss Corle looked around and caught Miss Ensley's eye. Miss Ensley, across the room, nodded and beamed. After this game, she mouthed in a whisper, enunciating the words with her lips as if Miss Corle could not hear. Miss Corle sighed and smiled back. What's going to happen then? Asked Virginia. Some day, said Miss Corle, your tongue will stick out so far you'll step on it. Do you have any pets? Asked Virginia. I have 2 Doberman pinschers, blue ribbons. I have a rat. He has nervous breakdowns. And I have my own trailer all fitted up with a kitchenette and a bathroom. And I have a playhouse, and it has a gardener and a cook. We have a gardener and a cook, and a secretary and an agent, continued Miss Corle. What's a secretary and an agent? And a director, and I have my friend, Mr. Hornblodt. Who's he? Mr. Hornblodt, said Miss Corle, with withering finality, is a producer. What's he produce? Smash hits. What are they? Did you see The Eternal Voice? Oh, you mean movies. No. Were you in it? Certainly. And Mr. Hornblodt produced it. I have a grown-up friend too, said Virginia. What does he do? Collects junk. Miss Corle snorted. His wife was a pioneer and got put in the bug house, like Columbus, explained Virginia. She went around without any clothes on. Disgusting, said Miss Corle. You couldn't do it, said Virginia. I bet Mr. Hornblot's wife couldn't do it either. You must come from very common people, said Miss Corle. My mother says that most people in the movies are common. Oh, she does she? Said Miss Corle, rapidly losing patience. She won't let me wave my hair the way yours is, said Virginia. Does your mother do it for you? No. Who does? I have a hairdresser. She waves it. If I had an ugly face, I'd have to wave my hair too, said Virginia. Why, you little cat, said Miss Corle quietly. I'm not a cat, I'm a rat. Look, I have side whiskers, see? I never quarrel with children, said Miss Corle. Phooey, said Virginia, in a loud voice. Or use slang, said Miss Corle. Phooey, phooey, and kafooey, said Virginia. The conclusion of musical chairs brought this discussion to an end, and temporarily prevented Virginia from expressing any further inarticulate disgust. Miss Ensley clapped her hands and stood in the middle of the room and smiled upon everybody. And now, children, she beamed, everyone find seats. We have a great treat in store for us. There was a scrambling into chairs, and rapt attention. Miss Catherine Corle, Claire's little cousin from Hollywood, has consented to sing. What is it going to be, Kathy? There was a craning of necks, and a squirming in chairs, as everybody looked around for the distinguished guest. Miss Corle rose, resenting both the Kathy and the little cousin, and sang with hauteur, Roses of Picardy. Phooey, whispered Virginia to Claire. What? Asked Claire. Kafooey, insisted Virginia. Quiet, please, warbled Miss Ensley. Miss Bishop at the piano struck a chord. The guests sat with blank expressions on their faces, staring at the singer, neither pleasure, boredom, nor excitement being manifest, but a collective solemnity blanketing them all until it had been sung that the one rose that bloomed not in Picardy was the rose that Miss Corle kept in her heart, whereupon Miss Ensley applauded and gave vent to audible but incoherent praise, and everybody else applauded too. There was some discussion among Miss Ensley, Miss Bishop, and the artist about an encore. I'm up in Victor Herbert's Italian street song, said Miss Corle, but I'm afraid it's a little old for them. Oh, do you think so? Miss Ensley asked Miss Bishop. I think I'll sing Some Day My Prince Will Come instead, said Miss Corle, and to her audience she appended, from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. After this rendition and subsequent applause, Miss Ensley bobbed up and chirped, "Community sing, community sing. One and all, community sing." And Miss Bishop at the piano went into "Happy Birthday to You." They began cautiously, gaining slowly in volume and confidence with the soprano assistance of Miss Ensley herself, until they reached a cacophonous but generally related harmony in "Happy Birthday to You, Happy Birthday to You, Happy Birthday Claire Ensley, Happy Birthday to You." This was followed by "My Country 'Tis of Thee" and "Frere Jacques." By that time, all the inhibitions of the guest had been melted away, and they sang loud and long. Virginia noticed that Miss Corle, however, was not singing now, but was listening and smiling appreciatively at Miss Ensley, right in the middle of "Frere Jacques." Virginia thought of the "Yow Yow" song she had sung for Ben. It all seemed so far away and out of place here, as if it had never happened. You would have to go into that place where you were alone in order to think back now about Ben and Wiki, and she sang "Frere Jacques" off-key and very loud. Dormez-vous, and all the world of the Arroyo bottom faded away again. Then came the refreshments, the inevitable white birthday cake with 11 candles, which had to be blown out by the hostess, and salad, fruit, nuts, candies, chocolate ice cream, peppermint ice cream, marshmallows, nougats, and, to Virginia, an innovation in sweets, a funny-tasting Annecy cookie. She tried some of everything. "Good victuals," she said. "These are victuals," she told anyone who cared to listen. "My rat eats victuals too." The gaiety was augmented with paper hats and snappers and favors, and everybody had a grand time. About 7 o'clock parents began to arrive. Hats and coats had to be found, and good nights and protestations of gratitude had to be uttered. Miss Corle was the first to go. Virginia heard her congratulate Claire and tell Miss Ensley that she had had a most charming day. "I'm so glad you could come, Kathy," said Miss Ensley. "It was a little young for me, but I had a lovely time," concluded Miss Corle. Virginia was being passed more Annecy cookies, and she was no longer sufficiently concerned to think of saying "phooey." She merely said, "Annecy cakes, yum yum." As the guest began to leave, Virginia saw Mother standing in the hall. She had brought Virginia's coat, and now it had to be worn. "Good night" had to be said to Claire, and Mother asked her if she had thanked Miss Ensley. Virginia hesitated. "What was it you were supposed to say?" "Oh, yes, it was a little young for me, but I had a nice time," she said. "Why, Virginia," Mother was surprised. Then Miss Ensley and Mother laughed and chatted for a moment, and after that they went out to the Pontiac, and Mother drove home. Daddy, of course, had been home for a long time, and Celia had dinner ready, and they went at once to the table. Fortunately, Mother understood that when you had refreshments at 6:30, you couldn't eat your dinner at 7:15. "Thank goodness birthdays don't come every day," was all Mother said. Then she told Daddy about Virginia's parting remark to Miss Ensley. She quoted it almost word for word, but she used an inflection of disdain which Virginia was sure didn't sound at all the way she had sounded. Mother said it with one hand on her hip and her nose in the air, and Daddy seemed to think it had been just the thing to say. It was hard to tell sometimes just what grown-ups meant. Maybe they didn't always know themselves. After dinner she went to her room, and presently Mother came up, and they talked about the party and all that had taken place. And just before going to bed, Virginia explained that you didn't have to wait until you were 13, but at 12 you could have your hair waved, and use perfume, and wear a suit of tan suede cloth, with fur collar, and cuffs, and gloves to match. Mother said yes, but there wasn't a true ring to it. Virginia was still proving the point at 9 o'clock, when Mother turned out the light, and kissed her good night, and went downstairs. She lay in the dark and decided that it had been a pleasant and interesting day. It would be nicer this minute if she didn't keep tasting the little anisey cookies. Maybe she shouldn't have eaten the 10th one, especially on top of chocolates and cake, and 2 kinds of ice cream, and marshmallows and nougats. But there had been so many things. You just had to taste them all. She tossed and turned for a long time, and in order to keep from thinking how the anisey cakes tasted, she thought of Ben and Wiki down below in the arroyo. If only she had saved the 10th anisey cake and brought it home for Wiki to eat. If only she could go down and see Ben and Wiki tomorrow without having to deceive Mother about it. If only she could. If only. Sleep at last defeated the rebellion of a glucose and saccharose-coated stomach, and in the morning she awoke with no ill effects whatever. It was Thursday, and she hadn't seen Ben since Monday. Poor Ben might have starved to death in that time. She arrived home from school in the afternoon, and finding it impossible to raid the refrigerator because of Celia's presence, she pilfered a banana and 2 apples from the fruit dish in the dining room, and was out of the house and down the trail before Celia noticed that she had disappeared. She hurried through the chaparral, past Gosh's house, no sign of the gnome, and on to Ben's shack. As she came upon it, she saw that Ben was not alone. She stopped and looked at the scene. The big one called Heavy was there, and the one called Tex was there too. So was the gnome. The gnome seemed to be examining Wiki's cage, which stood on the ground in front of the shack. Ben looked strange and serious. Heavy was saying, "What of it? It ain't anybody's fault, is it?" "Nuts," said Tex to Ben, spitting on the sand as he spoke. "You want to spit, make something of it." Ben didn't say anything. He just looked down at the cage and swallowed. "Skip it," said Heavy, "see?" "Come on," said Tex. "Let's get going." They walked on and disappeared beyond into the chaparral. Something was wrong. What was it? Virginia hurried toward Ben, and he looked up and saw her coming. "Hello, Ben. I brought some fruit this time." Ben nodded, but he didn't speak. Gosh sat on the ground beside the cage and stared up at her. "What's the matter?" asked Virginia. "What's wrong, Ben?" "It's Wiki," said Ben. Virginia glanced at the cage. The rat wasn't in it. "Where is he, Ben?" "He ain't here," said Ben helplessly. He looked as if he was going to cry. "I don't know how, but he's gone."